recording. Okay,
Great.
so this is for our E-Train review at SPD Academy, and I've got a few things to cover. One is some graphs, figures, kind of the numbers and things like that we usually do. In the slide deck that we put together, though, we also are highlighting some of the newer features that we think are going to be really helpful for the Academy, and glad to have
Okay.
feedback on.
Sure.
And we'll highlight some of the individual officers along the way. If you want, and if you have any questions, we can dive
Perfect.
in and look at the data together.
Sounds good.
So I'm going to bring this one up first to start. We'll be able to switch back and forth to some of the other things on the dashboard later.
Sure.
But we'll just drive it first from the visuals that we planned based off of data from the academy so far. So one caveat with all this is that the numbers are updated to kind of last Friday. So they've
That's fine.
yeah.
They they haven't done a video. They haven't done a video. They will be doing some tonight, but they had additional homework, so we weren't able to assign
Okay.
E-Train videos, so that's why we
Okay.
were able to do it that way.
Okay. All right. That's fine. I think it might have been like a few days before Friday.
That's
So like 9/12 is probably the
the
most
mo-
updated. So there might be a little discrepancy between what we
yeah.
have in the deck and what we have
It,
on.
it would be like a 2 to 3 video difference, if any, if at all. So
Right. Right. Okay. All right. Cool. So at the high level, I mean, those are the numbers that you're looking at as a class average in the department
that's
right now.
that's
Uh,
great.
the range, and I'll show you how this compares to previous cohorts later. It actually is the best average accuracy of any of the cohorts we've had so far by a little bit, which is good. The,
Yeah,
the,
by like what 1.5%, maybe something like that,
yeah,
maybe two
yeah,
percent.
something
Yeah.
like that. It's about 1% or so. It's got a little more spread in the accuracies, and we can talk about that. Like some
Yep.
people, there's a little more margin, but
Yep.
and then the spread across the different categories also, I think is on display here.
Yep.
Vehicle stops, in my recollection, continue to be one of the strongest topics
Yep.
across the class. Constitutional policing sometimes ends up on that lower end. I can see with some guys that it can be a little confusing with. So
Sure.
so those are the kind of the boundaries here. Domestic violence is this one over here. So
Yep.
just something to be aware of. I don't know if it's like a sequencing of the material in the course, but just something
Yeah.
to be aware of as they head into FTO,
Sure.
and have that baseline info about like, all right, how do we pair them with a field training officer who can give them some insight in that area, and on the
Sure.
constitutional side as well. But kinesic, like that's like out of the ballpark. You know what I mean? Like this
Yeah.
here and being able to read people, that's a really big win there. So I mean,
Yeah.
if you look at the other numbers there, almost everything's above 80. So
Yeah.
that's been different than we've seen in the past, and I think that's contributing to this, you know, uh, leading number in terms of the overall accuracy, and they're making their decisions relatively quickly too, which
Yeah, I would agree. The numbers look pretty decent, and we've been reviewing them as well, and we were pretty happy with them overall. As we've kind of spot checked here and there,
Mhm.
different days and stuff. So it's looked pretty good.
And it's giving you a feedback
Oh,
mechanism too, right? To be able to say like,
definitely.
yeah, we're spot checking them, they're doing all right, and
Yes,
okay, and the material's
no
getting
doubt.
through, and they're knowing how to apply it in scenarios, right?
Yes.
Okay, all right, that's great. That's great. That's what it's there for. That's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah, that's the whole point, right? Yeah.
So we break it down by individual officers. This is 60, 49. We just made the numbers bigger because otherwise they don't fit because there's just so many officers this time.
Yep.
But you can kind of see the spread in terms of high end to low end. We'll take a closer look at 60, as an example of someone who really shined in the academy a bit later, not only using accuracy, which you've seen quite a bit of, but also
Yep.
a newer measurement that we're able to deploy, which is really more useful in the field training and in service side. And we can talk about how that works. It's called
Yeah.
ability score, so you'll hear a bit more about that later. all the way down to this end here, where I know there are a couple officers who ended up dropping out of the academy,
That's
and
correct.
we'll see some other metrics that aren't just like accuracy, but also like the response time differences and things like that that we'll see
Right.
on that end too. But you're kind of familiar with those from previous classes.
Yes. Yeah. It unfortunately happens often. So we've run into this a couple times now. So
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a triage process a little bit too in the academy, just to find out if it's a right fit or not, right? So.
sure. Yep.
So that's great. All right. Well, on the whole, so one thing is that the order of the scenarios is a little different this time than we've had in previous cohorts. So
Yes.
so we don't have a comparison of the average to previous times, but one of the features that particularly stands out is you've got this kind of like undulating pattern where the accuracy is generally going above and below, but mostly kind of trending upward. Except for those last 50 trials, they had some really hard decisions to make.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so we can talk, a little bit more about, what the specifics were about that if you'd like. But there is actually, when we look at the ability score, we can get into like kind of how we're starting to measure the difficulty of those videos, and that can be a really useful tool for modulating the training, modulating which scenarios are shown to which officer based on how well they're doing. Uh,
Yeah.
in the past academy environment. But
Okay.
overall, I mean, as you see, it's wavering around that average accuracy at the highest we've had so far, which is great,
Yeah.
even with those last 50, which were really hard for a good
Yeah.
number of them.
Hmm.
Um, Response time, though, fits a similar trend that we've had in the past, right? They kind of get a
Yeah.
little learning curve, a little bit used to the program, but they're also learning how to recognize things faster.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like almost 25% drop in decision time you get by the time you get to around here. Now, this is where those more difficult scenarios were happening again. And you see there's a little bump in their decision time, meaning like they're yeah,
Slow down.
trying to yeah, they're just not sure exactly of what their answers are, and they're just trying to grasp
Yeah.
something, and it shows up a little bit in terms of that confidence, really, as measured by the response time. So
Yeah.
but generally a very similar trend to the past, where they're overall improving their decision time. Even for those harder scenarios, they're doing way better than they were
Yeah.
you know
That's
zero.
probably a little bit of familiarity and comfortability with the program, as well as also now feeling more confident in themselves. I think there's a kind of a combination of two.
Yeah, combination, feeling more confident in themselves and the material you guys are covering, things like that are contributing to this trend here, particularly. So, but when they have less confidence on the flip side, kind of the converse of that, you get a little bit of this rise, and that's what we saw in the
Yeah.
previous slide with the lower accuracies. So this is what I was mentioning about the cohort comparisons. Over here being, the highest mean that we've had so far. Now, you wouldn't necessarily call it statistically significant because the overlap in these error bars, but it's certainly statistically significant from the cohort two, which was about a year ago. So there's
Yes.
a big bump seasonally in terms of like how much content is getting into their decision making real time for scenarios. So that's a big win.
Yeah. No, that is quite the improvement, no doubt. We'll take a 4% raise in that any day of the week. So that's fantastic.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's not just the 4%, it's also that the error bars are so far apart too, meaning
Yeah.
like there's a noticeable difference in what you
Yeah.
guys, did from last year to this year. So that's spectacular. That's a great feather in the cap. On the decision time side, now this is kind of interesting. I mean, it's not just that they're better, but they're also, I would say, kind of like, I wouldn't say they're slowing their decisions down, but they are, right? But
Yeah.
they're taking in more of the information and
Mm,
exercising that decision in the amount of time that they have. They're not exactly
yeah.
like, dilly-dallying on their decisions, but this little bit of bump in the decision time might be telling us kind of like what that optimum time is for that class,
Yeah.
to make those decisions. So it's kind of a change in that trend here, in
Yeah.
terms of the average decision time. But it's, again, it can't really compare four to one through three because the order is different. The material, experience with the material is a little different.
Sure.
but
No, it
looking very good.
makes sense though. We talk about that a lot. We have like a term we call it like balancing speed and accuracy with like on the firearms end, but it's also just kind of applies to any decision making in general, right? Like,
Yeah,
the longer I take on it, the better the decision. However, there's a certain time aspect to it. So that's just the whole purpose of this stuff. But they're very well aware of this, and we talk about balancing that out often. And that's a thing that we really hammer home, understanding how we think and why we think it, and what that how that affects our decisions. So this is great.
right, right. Okay, great. All right, fantastic. I mean, it balance, teaching that balance, I think is pretty important. So,
Huge.
and it sounds like you guys are doing that on the firearm side, and it's coming through, in this area as well. So, I think it's definitely playing out very well for you guys in other
Yeah,
areas where they have decisions to make.
no doubt.
Um, let's see. All right, so on the single answer versus multiple choice, again, we can break it down by the individual officers.
Yeah.
43 is the one that I think that was a dropout. So we could talk about that officer a little bit later. I noticed they just like stopped at some point, but you get
Um,
the kind of one-to-one relationship by the multi-choice to single answer. A little easier for me at least to see it on this kind of graph, which we've done in the past, where we notice kind of if there's any kind of decision hesitancy, particularly on this end here, where there's this negative difference between their multi-choice to the
yeah.
single choice answers. Um, but and I know that a couple of these over here did end up
Yeah, I actually have
working
the
out.
the list up on my computer here, and it looks like 40. Oh, one second. There are a few. Those last three are not dropouts.
Right, they're not.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, but there is a few. There are a few in there, and then actually 43 is not a dropout. I actually had to was when we had our meeting. I was going to kind of talk about his account has been an issue.
Uh-huh.
It almost fixed, and then I think that I gotta send Jordan an email or someone an email explaining that because it wasn't the last few times we were made aware of it very recently that he missed out on the first the last 6 to 8 videos I believe. So
43?
um, yes,
Oh, okay.
yeah. So
All
he's
right.
still an active person there.
That's okay. I had a question about that because I saw that he had great performance. I mean, he's one of the better performers, and then it just
Yes,
like he didn't have any of the a bunch of videos weren't seen, so I thought he
yes,
may have dropped out. Okay, so there's like a some kind of bug in terms of how his program's working.
correct.
Okay. All right. We'll get Sport Jordan on that for you
Sure.
as soon as possible.
Yeah.
But that answers that question because I saw like Officer 60 was particularly excelling, basically no difference between the multi and the single.
That's
And
awesome.
we had like 61 I think was possibly a dropout, so there's that little difference
He
there.
was 61
Uh,
was a dropout, and that tracks with Officer 60. She does extremely well.
okay.
Her decision making and overall her quality throughout the academy is top notch. So she's one of our better recruits. So there's no surprise with her numbers there.
Great. Okay. Yeah. We'll look at a little more detailed reporting now that we have in the dashboard, this AI generated report that really gives you a much more thorough breakdown kind of how, how
Cool.
everything is, what she's learning, how long she's working on things like that in the scenarios
Yeah.
that you need train. And it's a nice documentation kind of helper.
Yeah.
So now these ones at the lower end, though, those could be really necessary info going into FTO because
Yes.
so that's whether they're in SPD or do you know offhand about how many like these last five are in SPD or outside?
The last three definitely are SPD 53, 54, 56. Everyone
Okay.
except for Officer 56 is going to be working here at SPD.
Okay.
Unfortunately,
Hey,
unfortunately.
Liz, it is. I mean,
No,
we
there's room for improvement.
yeah, we had something like this with one of the Camillus the graduates who went to Camillus, and
Hmm.
we targeted it in FTO. he was paired, we talked to the chief about it so he can be paired up with a field trainer who is more
Mm,
specialized in, areas that he was having deficits in, and
hmm.
a tremendous turnaround in terms of
That's great.
how he's seeing these things. So
That's great.
if that big chunk down there is SPD, that helps us kind of, get a
Yes.
leg up on their field training of those last five there. So
Agreed.
all right, cool. Well, we can take a look at that. I was going to make a note that that's on the single answer versus multi-choice. Um, and then I mean this plot we looked at I think last time, but it
Yes.
canonizes kind of those accuracy differences that we see for the officers between their single and their multi-choice, along with
Hmm.
their response time differences. So I mean 57 is one of those ones that I think was a dropout, and you can see
She
the
was.
huge difference. You see that huge
Yes.
difference there. And but we get a better look when we look by individual question type.
Okay.
At the, like number 60 we talked about already, really, shining on the constitutional side of things. I'll show
Yeah.
you her ability score a little bit later as an example of that.
Yeah.
And some of the other officers you can see pointed out here as well, by topics, right? Now,
Yeah.
Kinesic, even though that's one of the highest average categories that we had, that is the highest in the class right now. You see, it's got this huge spread to it. So there's
Huge.
a lot of variability in terms of people's ability to read that kind of body language in the course. So that's
Yeah.
kind of an interesting thing to note. And I don't know if that impacts kind of which scenarios you focus on or how you deliver that information, but that's potentially useful.
Yeah, that's actually huge. That's pretty eye-opening to see such a spread like that.
So all right. And then now this is again on the lower end, some of the ones that stood out on the lower end, probably some of the dropouts.
Hmm.
And you can see, kind of reinforcing the specific categories that were, not necessarily working the best, and it kind of worked up
Yeah.
to level two, 57 coming up a couple times on the lower end. So now the new
Yeah.
features and additions. So these are the things that I think we're going to really, canonize some of the trends that we've seen, but also give some robustness to how the scenarios are picked when they go into field training on the later end too, based off of this baseline that they've done in the academy. So
Sure.
since ability scores and the difficulty numbers are going to be relatively new to you, we prepared this little explanation of it because it's useful to know kind of a little bit about the mechanics of how the engine is working, right?
Great.
And so we generally, when we do that single choice versus multi-choice, we notice, right, that generally the multi-choice is the difference where people have, problems versus single answer. It's relatively easier for them in
Sure.
general. And so that measurement then is tied to that particular decision, uh,
Hmm.
in that point in the scenario, so that then we can start measuring something that we call the difficulty score for that video. So generally, you see like the spread of the multi-choice decisions that your class has done. They're generally
Yeah.
more difficult, right? So that's why they're shifted into a higher
So,
difficulty score,
yeah.
right, than the single answer,
Yeah.
right? Where what you see is kind of to the left here, right?
Sure.
So that's like kind of the guide for how the questions are marked by this degree of difficulty. And in a whole scenario, you got multiple questions, right? So
Sure.
we'll use those, the a composite of those difficulty scores in a scenario to give us a sense of how difficult that particular scenario is, right?
Gotcha.
So that's a way that we actually modulate up and down the overall difficulty of what the next scenario is that an officer sees, and how well they do on a very difficult scenario would give them a higher ability score. And if
Right.
they do poorly on like a very low difficulty score, right, then that means that it will remove a lot of ability score points for them. So
Makes sense.
what it does then is it uses that information to pick like, all right, what's the next difficulty level right, of the next scenario that's going to optimally give them a chance to improve their difficulty score. So like
Sure.
kind of match them to their ability score rather than giving somebody something that's really hard, like kind of like we saw at the end of the course in those last 50 questions so far, where
Hmm.
the accuracies just drop like a rock, right? Generally,
Yeah.
those ended up being quite difficult for the for the officers. So it's a way that in the academy, it doesn't really matter as much because you're just trying to expose them to information. When they're in
Correct.
field training and they're in service and stuff like that, we found that this is a really useful mechanism to keep the training matched to where their capability is and keep pushing them in
Hmm.
the direction that that they want to be in.
Okay.
So this is really a great way to improve quality and accuracy of the assessment and of the training at the same time, particularly the training.
Hmm.
So we break down the types of questions also in the similar kind of way.
Sure.
Constitutional being like one of the lower ends, and domestic violence being kind of on the lower ends. You can see their difficulty scores are by magnitude shifted more to the right, either like
Yes.
in the positive direction or in the least negative value. Um,
Yeah.
and you see kind of this gradation of the other areas. I mean, there were very few corrections questions there, so
Sure.
that's why it shifts. It's got such a big value like that.
Yeah.
But it was shifted particularly hard in that direction. Now, the using the ability trend as a measurement that's matched to the difficulty of the questions, the we can see over the course of the class how the ability score is a little different than the accuracy. Remember, the accuracy has got this like it had like this up and this down and up and a down.
Yeah.
Then it was generally trending up, but then it kind of had that big, bowl,
Dip.
yeah, that big like valley dip around the last 50. Here,
Yes.
the ability score, it's modulated by the difficulty of the videos that they're seeing at that particular time. So generally, you're seeing that ability. This is averaged across the class.
Yep.
We have a trend line thrown in there to kind of smooth it out and give you a cleaner curve.
Yep.
But the raw data against the trend line, you see like it's generally improving, generally going up as they're learning the skills, they're applying it to more
Sure.
difficult scenarios. And then over that last, kind of 25 that are shown here is where it starts like kind of tapering off just a little bit. But it's not this huge drop because, you've got the background kind of momentum of them leveling up their ability to a certain level. So
Yeah.
that now them being exposed to new material, it's not really like it falls off a rock or falls off a cliff, but it's more like it just kind of flattens out a little bit and maybe tapers down a tad.
Sure. This kind of seems like it's in line of how we perceive them,
Hmm.
as opposed to like, okay, yeah, sure, you may not have gotten the questions completely correct, but what's your understanding of the material overall, as opposed to like the specific question here or there where you guys are, maybe they're getting a specific question wrong, or maybe it's the way the question's worded that the class, we're seeing a huge dip in the class average for that particular question or scenario. However, their ability and their understanding and the things that they're actually learning, this is
Right.
how we would kind of mimics like my perception of their learning, um, based off of just being around them all the time. This graph more mimics their skill level overall as they've gone through. So this is pretty cool.
Oh, okay, that's great. That's really interesting to hear. I mean, it kind of means like it was mimicking the skill level that you're seeing. It's kind of like
Yes.
it's giving a number really to that kind of subjective assessment of you taking in the totality of everything. They
Yes.
say kind of
The
totality of circumstances, right?
yes.
That's cool. That's really neat. Okay,
No, that's
that was
super
not
cool.
expected. That's cool.
No, it was super cool because like I'm watching this and so how well are they doing? And right now we're in the point of the academy on that right side where it's dipping there. We are also challenging them beyond just kind of like the kindergarten version of things, and we're now moving into a little bit more of like the middle school, high school stuff, and we're seeing their the accuracy of which they're doing it, and like I would say a poor term would be the correctness of their actions
Yeah.
has decreased, but what we're challenging them to do is significantly increased. So how we feel about it is their overall performance isn't plummeting. It's just it's correctly dipping slightly based off of the level of difficulty that they're being exposed to.
That's great. Yeah. Okay. Well,
Yep.
that's totally showing up here because,
Yes. It's
uh,
exactly what it looks like. Yep.
great. That's great. Okay. Cool. I'm glad it is exactly what it looks like.
No, truly, like if I were to graph that, that would be exactly how I would perceive the class's quality. That gray kind of that whole area right there would be exactly how I perceive. Some people are doing extremely well, and there's some people below, but overall, that would be the trend of the class in general.
Okay. All right. Trend of the class looks good. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Very good.
Yep.
Those ability charts, like by individual officer, like that previous one, that's kind of the class group average.
Sure.
But this is a snapshot of Officer 60 we talked about already. And
Hmm.
so we have now it's activated from this button. It'll say show charts or hide charts as it's shown here. But
Sure.
there's a capability now to be able to see that ability score change over time.
Oh, that's awesome.
And now it's shown here in a drop down by type of question too. So you could look overall, you could look by question type. And these graphs over here are particularly useful to be able to see like by topic against department average. So like
Yeah.
in this particular case, DUI is a little bit weaker for this officer,
Yep.
but
Yep.
particularly strong in kinesic training, right?
Okay.
She's like way out here, right?
She was her strength in there is that she's actually was a college lacrosse goalie. So kind of her bread and butter is to read people's performance and their body language. So
Very cool.
that trends with what her strengths would be.
Great. Great. Okay. Yeah, trending with her strengths and you being able to zoom in and kind of see that.
Yeah.
And then also that's information again, kind of like, in the case that we looked at earlier with like those bottom five or six, like useful to pass on to FTO. This is
Yep.
also useful in another way to pass on to FTO or for, parent,
Sure.
like, she's great in that area. You don't really need to put her with someone who's, strong in that area, maybe in DUI, but
Sure.
or that there's another path within the department that's
Sure.
particularly going to be a great application of her skills in kinesic in kinesic training.
Agreed.
um okay, now the other cool thing is the report generator. So
Yep.
in the dashboard on each office, we have two versions of this now. So we're just kind of rolling this out now, and so you guys will be able to play around with it for the
Okay.
remainder of the time with the academy. Tell us what you think about it, but I think it could be pretty helpful. It's
Sure.
activated by this generate report button that's on the row with each scenario. This is a snapshot of what it would look like. This is for Officer 41.
Okay.
So, you get a summary of who it is, what that session date was, what their overall accuracy was in that session, response time, what were
Yep.
the topics in that scenario. So this was tagged with a tactical, and what's the name of it. So you get a summary of training objectives, the key skills and behaviors observed, where they, it's marked by the timestamp of
Sure.
what the prompt was. There are other things that are off screen here are like the strengths and weaknesses, areas of improvement to do, and some more details on this kind of on these key skills and behaviors observed. It's like 1 to 2 pager, gives you a nice written summary of what they saw, what topics they learned about, and how well they did on them, for documentation purposes. And
Cool.
that's not only for the individual officers. I know you guys haven't used Classroom as much, but you're
We have
familiar
not
with
yet.
it, I think, right? Where you do the QR code for like a big group.
Yep.
I think, right. Okay. And so that's that option is available for the classroom setting as well, where instead of just having like 80% on constitutional and 76% on tactical, you've got now
Sure.
the ability to generate a report which looks something a little bit like this. And who's the instructor? This is just a random text string for the name of the session, but it would be like
Sure.
SPD group, Tuesday, Wednesday, and a summary of how many people, how long the class was. So you would input that like it's a half an hour, it's 1 hour. So like when they've got to
Sure.
do like we got to do X number of hours of a certain type of training. Now you've got an easy documentation.
Mhm.
method afterwards to say like, all right, what topics did we cover? And,
Yeah.
you know, and again, broken down by what were the particular scenarios that you covered. So I can give you a little more fuller, you know, description of what's in those later. But those are the some of the newer features that you know, look like they really enhance the you know, the documentation side, which I know we haven't really focused on as much yet. But we've been getting more and more feedback that that's an area that that needs a little more, uh, you know, that can benefit more, you know, for our clients, and
Yes.
that's something that we've started incorporating. This is for the classroom version, where you have highlights, you know, from individual moments in the in the class. You can highlight what were the low performing prompts. So like to kind of target when it's both uh, anonymous user and a logged in user, you get kind of the what were the what were the you know, what were the low performing items that you need to focus on. Either you target
Yeah.
that individually or you do it as a class, but it's a good way of, you know, highlighting some of those items. But you know, the
Cool.
YouTube summary is a little bit longer because there's usually a little more, you know, info that you go through in a half an hour class versus
Right.
you know, when it's like a few questions on a session.
Yeah.
But still, it's we're finding it's a very useful tool, particularly for the in-service side, and others there. So anyway, so that's kind of a you know, a broad overview of, you know, what the class has done so far, what the strengths and weaknesses have been there, and some of the newer things that are now on the dashboard uh,
Yeah.
for, you know, the remainder of this class, and you know, we, you know, to consider for future use. So what what questions can I answer, if any, about like kind of the new stuff, and then we could talk a little bit more about kind of this, you know, handoff stage to FTO.
I don't have off the top of my head, I don't have too many questions. I do really like the AI generated summaries that I think those are fantastic. Um, I think that's a great tool for us, like you said, as far as documentation is concerned. Sometimes we have a difficult time placing certain things into words, so just being able to have it already set up and having a really good frame of reference as far as, hey, for this particular tool, we're seeing these trends, which is also in line with what we're seeing elsewhere. I think that's a really great way to quickly get an answer to someone who's asking,
Mhm.
and I think that's a really good feature there. We'll definitely use that, you know, in certain situations where documentation is required. So I think that's fantastic.
And do you guys
Um,
have regular need for documentation, like documentation requirements
so
in the
luckily,
academy?
it's not. I wouldn't say it's regular. You know, if an officer is doing well, um, you know, our need to document things decreases. It's not to say that we wouldn't document them, but you know, saying that they're doing well and moving forward is kind of what is the required, other than obviously just proving that through documentation. But you know, that we don't particularly use E-trains specifically as a standalone reference point. We use it to add to a totality of a circumstance, to either highlight an officer. We use it to kind of justify and to as a secondary point, like, hey, this is what I'm seeing from this person. Hey, let's take a look at their E-train. Yep, that's also in line with what we're seeing. And almost every time it does trend exactly with what we understand these guys and gals to be capable of.
Yeah,
So it's a great like justification for my personal opinion, as well as the rest of the staff's. And it allows us to put numbers and figures and all the charts and graphs and things like that. That, hey, this is what we're seeing from this person. We're seeing it here, and as well as on E-Train, and it just justifies kind of our thoughts. So it's a really good tool to be able to do that, because
right,
we've yet to come across any like massive discrepancies from what we're seeing on our end to what they're expressing and showing on their E-Train end. There's yet to be a time where there's been a huge discrepancy there. So
right. Okay, okay. Yeah, I mean, not having any, you know, daylight really, any discrepancies between what you're seeing and, you know, what we're measuring. that's
Right.
incredibly important to be able to, justify kind of what the next step is. So that's
Agreed.
the key. So I'm gonna kind of bookmark then that to be the end, kind of the performance review side of things before we,
Okay.
pivot to some other things. But I think that's a good kind of capstone on,
Agreed.
what was covered in the A-Train performance review here for the Academy, and what are the other kind of, next stage tools that, that we'll be integrating into Academy and field training and
Cool.
stuff like that. All right, cool.